Good afternoon, students.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. So, students, we have, last time completed hypersensitivity, right? So, there are four different types of hypersensitivity, right? And, we always see immunity or the immune system as our friend, right? And we have seen how it is our friend, right? It protects us. It protects us from bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, helminths, okay? Not only the exogenous antigen, immune system also helps us, it provides us protection from the internal antigens, right? New antigens that are formed after there is cancer or after there is some viral infection, so some new antigens are formed, right? So immune system has been our friend, right? But कभी कभी friend के साथ भी कुछ problem हो सकती है, right? So hypersensitivity reaction was one example, right? So you saw how there was an inappropriate immune response, okay, against an antigen, against an allergen. So we call it as allergen, okay, but it is also an antigen, okay. So in hypersensitivity there was an inappropriate immune response, and that was leading to kind of problems, okay. Today we are going to talk about another problem because of immune system, okay, and that is called as autoimmune autoimmunity, okay. Now auto means self, right? So when the immune system starts to attack the self, that is autoimmunity, okay. And while studying this you will realize how it is different from hypersensitivity, okay. But the immune system, which is basically there to attack the foreign antigens, a problem will be there when it start attacking the self antigens, okay. And that's why it is called as autoimmune or autoimmunity or autoimmune disorders. So diseases because of autoimmunity are called as autoimmune disorders, okay. So now I think a lot of students have joined, so we can start with the class. So let me start sharing the slides. Okay, so we will be talking about autoimmunity, okay, and there are a lot of things that we will be discussing. So we will be talking about the history, autoimmune disorders, gender difference. So you will see that autoimmune disorders are more common in females as compared to males. So we will see that reason, the mechanism of autoimmunity. So like in hypersensitivity there were different mechanisms, even for autoimmunity there are different mechanisms. So we will see these mechanisms. We will talk about autoimmune diseases, okay. We will talk about the treatment of these diseases and the animal models for autoimmune disorders. So there are so many things that we will talk about it. Autoimmune diseases, there are so many, we may not discuss each and every disease in detail. So we'll see how much to tell you, right? Okay, so you can see, if I talk about autoimmune disorders, so there are so many autoimmune disorders like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, autoimmune anemia, Goodpasture syndrome, insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm sure you must have heard some of these names. Okay, Now, if we talk about its history, it was Paul Ehrlich who, said that sometime your immune system can go array and attack against the self antigens. Okay, and Paul Ehrlich he termed this phenomena as horror autotoxicus. Okay, so you can understand horror means डरावना, auto matlab self. Okay, so horror autotoxicus literally it means the horror of self toxicity. Okay, now he said that because of failure of self tolerance, that results in an appropriate immune response against self antigens, which is autoimmunity. Okay, so there is a mechanism which is tolerance. So our body knows which cells to attack and which not to attack, and when that self tolerance mechanism it fails, that leads to autoimmunity. Okay, so in 1960s it was said that all self-reactive lymphocytes were eliminated during their development, right? So when a person is developing, when a child is developing, so initially during the time of development our immune system sees the self antigen and do not provide lymphocytes against it. Okay, and that failure to eliminate these lymphocytes lead to autoimmunity, right? So you know वो like we say that जब बच्चा बड़ा हो रहा होता है so whatever he sees around he accepts that that this is right. So similarly, when our immune system, a child is growing, the immune system, when it sees the self thing, it recognizes that these are the self things and I should not create problem for the self thing. But sometimes this mechanism can fail and that can lead to autoimmunity. Okay. So under normal circumstances, immune system will not destroy self antigen because it is tuned that way, it is evolved that way. Okay, so autoimmunity can be defined as breakdown of mechanisms responsible for self tolerance, right? जो self के लिए tolerance थी for not mounting an immune response against self antigen, if that fails, that lead to autoimmunity and induction of an immune response against self components. Okay, so in numerous autoimmune diseases, it is well recognized that product of the immune system cause damage to the self cell. बात समझ आई? तो अगर जो एक mechanism है self tolerance का, okay, if that fails, that lead to autoimmune disorders. Now, in the late 1970s, a lot of experimental evidences they revealed that not all self-reactive lymphocytes are deleted during T and B cell maturation, right? So, जो हम बात कर रहे हैं self-reactive lymphocytes की, so sometimes they are not eliminated from our system. Okay. Even the healthy people have been shown to possess mature recirculating self-reactive lymphocytes. So those lymphocytes are there in the body, but our mechanism is tolerating them. Okay, self-tolerance, but does not result in immunity. Okay, so as I said, there is some mechanism. Okay, so lymphocyte activity is regulated through clonal energy or clonal suppression. ठीक है, so there is clonal energy, तो तुम्हारे cells multiply नहीं होंगे या clonal suppression है उन cells का, right? But if that regulation fails, so breakdown in this regulation lead to activation of self-reactive clones of T or B cells, and that lead to generating cell-mediated or humoral response against the self-antigens. Okay, so ये पूरी कहानी है. If that mechanism of self-tolerance it breakdowns, then it can lead to activation of the B and the T cells, which are against the self-antigens. and that can lead to autoimmunity. Now, autoimmunity can cause serious damage to cells and organs, and sometimes it could be fatal, right? And autoimmunity can be divided into organ specific और systemic. Okay, so हमने जैसे पिछले उसमें भी देखा था hypersensitivity में that it could be localized or it could be systemic throughout the body. Okay, so organ specific में किसी एक organ को damage करना शुरू करेगी. Just for example, you read the term Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? So in this case, the immunity will attack the thyroid. Okay, so that is organ specific. Okay, and there is a systemic when many organs get damaged. So that is like, for example, systemic lupus erythematosus. Okay, so it can be divided into organ specific and systemic autoimmune diseases, and they can damage could be due to antibodies or the T cells, right? So it can be both cell mediated or humoral immune response in such cases, and it affects almost 5 to 7% of human population. So the number is high. So a lot of people suffer from autoimmune diseases. Okay, so this is what happens. Immune regulation. So immune system have innate immunity, acquired immunity, and acquired immunity includes cell mediated and humoral immunity. So a defect in any arm of the immune system can trigger autoimmunity, right? So हमने T cells, B cells, complement system इन सब के बारे में knowledge gain की है. So there can be problem in any of this system, and that can lead to autoimmunity. Now, autoimmunity can affect any organ system in the human body. Okay, so you can see there can be uveitis of the eyes, multiple sclerosis, brain में, pemphigus, Sjögren's syndrome, Goodpasture syndrome, rheumatic fever, diabetes, hepatitis, Addison disease, colitis, hemolytic anemia, rheumatoid arthritis. So these disease, they can affect any organ or any organ system, and also it could be multiple, right? So you can see example of some of the organ specific autoimmune disorders. Okay, just for example, you have Addison disease in which adrenal cells are damaged. Okay, autoimmune hemolytic anemia where the RBC membrane proteins are attacked. Okay, so antibodies are generated against these RBC membrane proteins. Goodpasture syndrome में renal and lung basement membranes get damaged. Okay, Graves disease जिसमें thyroid stimulating hormone receptor is attacked. Hashimoto thyroiditis, thyroid proteins and cells, right? Myocardial infarction in which heart gets affected. Okay, so there are a lot of organ specific autoimmune diseases, and as I said, some of them can be systemic autoimmune diseases. Example is your ankylosing spondylitis, which affects the vertebrae. Okay, multiple sclerosis, brain or the white matter is affected, rheumatoid arthritis, the connective tissues in the body, right, and so on. Okay. Okay, so let's see the difference here. So when we say organ specific, so autoimmune attack versus self antigen of given organ. Okay, so a given organ के against attack होगा. Okay, it results in damage of organ structure and function. Okay, so only that organ is affected, and the treatment is focused on the replacement of organ function. Okay, So just for example, if you know, uh, if your thyroid gland is affected, so uska function replace kiya ja sakta hai by giving thyroid injections, right? Hormone addition, right? So treatment is focused on that. And when it is non-organ, right, systemic, then widespread self antigens are targeted. So in this case, multiple self antigens are targeted. The damage affect such structures as blood vessels, cell nuclei, right? So they blood vessel is everywhere, right? Cell nuclei is in every cell. So the damage is throughout the body. And treatment is aimed to inhibit excessive activation of the immune system. And in this case, we are not focusing on an organ, we are focusing on suppressing the immune system. ओके, क्योंकि प्रॉब्लम क्या क्रिएट कर रहा है? इम्यून सिस्टम. तो हम क्या करेंगे? इम्यून सिस्टम को ही शट डाउन कर देंगे ताकि ऑर्गन्स या हमारे जो भी सेल्स हैं वो सब बचे रहें, राइट? Now the next thing that I said, that there is a gender difference in autoimmune disease, right? And it is more common in females as compared to males. Okay, so susceptibility to many autoimmune diseases differ between two sexes. For example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, SLE. SLE is systemic lupus erythematosus. MS, multiple sclerosis, RA, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, they preferentially affect women. And you can see this graph. So if you talk about Sjögren's syndrome, it is, so much in females as compared to males, right? So you can see most of these diseases, they are more in females, whereas colitis and this diabetes mellitus, again this is almost same in male and female. So females are more prone to autoimmune diseases. The reasons could be the hormonal differences, okay, and effect of fetal cells in maternal circulation during pregnancy, okay. So these are thought to be the two major reasons for females showing more autoimmune diseases as compared to males. So in US, out of 9 million patients of autoimmune disease, 6.7 million are women. So you can see more than, so you can say around 60%, right? More apparent in some diseases. We have already seen that example. And if we talk about the male-female ratio, so in multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis, the ratio is 1:2. So if there is one patient of one male patient, then there are two female patient or three female patients. And if we talk about systemic lupus erythematosus, the ratio is 1:9. So one male, 9 female, right? So we know this, but we exactly don't know the reason. So I am skipping this at the moment, but you can see it's all because of the estrogen and the estrogen levels, right? So progesterone, right? So this is the female reproductive years and the post-menopausal years, and because of the difference of the hormones, so these females are more susceptible for autoimmune diseases, right? So as I said, we exactly don't know the reason, but there are a lot of explanations. So immunization studies, they suggest that the female produce higher titer of antibodies. So we know that, that females mount a stronger immune response against an antigen. So, there are a lot of studies which have shown that females produce higher titer of antibodies. Okay, and in general, female tend to mount more vigorous immune response. Okay, and you can see that the females have higher level of CD4 positive T cells, and they have higher level of IgM in the serum, right? And you can see so females के पास ज़्यादा IgM है, right? एंटीजन प्रेजेंटिंग सेल्स किसको एक्टिवेट करते हैं? CD4 पॉजिटिव टी सेल्स को, राइट? सो कोई भी पैथोजन आएगा तो वो CD4 सेल्स ज़्यादा हैं, वो जल्दी एक्टिवेट होंगे एंड they will produce a better immune response, right? But how these gender differences arise? Okay, so that can be traced to sex hormones, right? So estrogen has been associated with autoimmune diseases. Experiments on mice suggest that estradiol or testosterone can alter outcome of infection, and in humans estrogen on its own does not play a significant role in etiology of the diseases. Okay, but it may be important in SLE. So we saw that in SLE, the ratio of male to female is 1:9. Okay, so this data suggests that estrogen can stimulate autoantibody production. Okay, but still, the mechanisms are not fully clear. Additionally, androgens such as testosterone clearly play an important role in some autoimmune diseases, right? So, for example, testosterone is effective in increasing some autoimmune response and thus protective against many autoimmune diseases. So these are, studies of mice. I'm not going to discuss this. Okay. Again, as I said, why these hormones are affecting the immune response. And again, the problem is we do not fully understand. We do not understand the link between, the hormones and the immune system. What happens when hormone levels go up? What happens when hormone level goes down? If it is down, then how it is affecting the immune response? If the level is up, how it is affecting? Okay. It is likely that hormones which circulate throughout the body alter immune response by altering pattern of gene expression. Okay, so this is a possibility. Sex steroids, they are highly lipophilic group of compound. I'm sure you know this, that these hormones, they are lipophilic, right? So they function by passing through the cell membrane and bind a cytoplasmic receptor. And binding leads to activation or in some instances repression of gene expression, right? So these hormones, they may be altering the gene expression. Therefore, sex hormones can regulate gene expression in cells that contain hormone receptors and play an important role in the immune system, right? So basically, Le De Ke Kahani is all about the hormones and its association with the immune response. Okay. Okay. However, hormonal effect on immune responses are not limited only to steroidal sex hormones. Okay. Another very important hormone is your prolactin. Okay. And again, this is expressed in higher level in women, right? Prolactin, it is, more after pregnancy, right? So it's not a member of lipophilic sex steroid family that includes estrogen, progesterone and testosterone. So इससे पहले हमने उनका effect देखा था. Okay. So prolactin is stimulated by estrogen, thus explaining higher level in women and very high levels during pregnancy, right? क्योंकि pregnancy में estrogen levels भी high हो जाते हैं, right? So prolactin also have a profound influence on immune responses. So माइस में ये एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करके देखा गया कि अगर हम ये पिट्यूटरी को निकाल देते हैं, राइट, so that results in immunosuppression, right, which can be entirely reversed by ट्रीटमेंट विद एक्सोजेनस प्रोलैक्टिन। सो इसका मतलब प्रोलैक्टिन का रोल है, राइट। हमने माइस में क्या किया, पिट्यूटरी ग्लैंड निकाल दिया, राइट। सो उसका माइस का इम्यून सिस्टम शट डाउन हो गया, इसका मतलब डायरेक्ट रिलेशन है। अब हमने बाहर से प्रोलैक्टिन उसको इंजेक्ट कर दिया एंड द इम्यून सिस्टम स्टार्टेड वर्किंग, इसका मतलब देयर इज a correlation, right? So presence of prolactin receptors on T and B cells in humans, that is a further evidence that prolactin may play a role in regulating immune response. So prolactin का role भी immune response में देखा गया है, right? And it is more in females, right? Another thing is pregnancy. It gives a clue how gender play a role in regulating immune response, right? Again, this is very interesting thing. Women during pregnancy tolerate the fetus, which is a foreign graft, right? So, fetus में फादर के भी बहुत सारे एंटीजेंस हैं, राइट। हमने एक एग्जांपल भी देखा था पिछली बार, राइट, इरिथ्रोब्लास्टोसिस फिटालिस वाले केस में, when the mother is negative but the child is carrying the foreign antigen, but still the immune system is not attacking the fetus जबकि वो एक foreign graft है, right? So that makes it likely that the female immune system undergo important modifications during pregnancy. Okay, so women normally tend to mount more Th1 like response than Th2 response, and during pregnancy वो जो response है वो पलट जाता है। Okay, ये जो Th1 Th2 response है, I think the student who would be talking about T cells, that student will tell what is this Th1 Th2 response, but I'll just tell you that Th1 response में different cytokines produce होती हैं, Th2 response में different cytokines produce होते हैं, and they affect the humoral or the cell mediated immune response. Okay, another effect of pregnancy is the presence of fetal cells in the maternal circulation. So ये भी हमने last time बात की थी कि जो fetal के cells हैं, they get into the mother circulation. Okay, and it is known that fetal cells can persist in the maternal circulation for decades. So these long-lived fetal cells may play a significant role in the development of autoimmune diseases. Okay. Okay. Okay, now, we have seen that mostly because of the hormones, females are more susceptible to autoimmune diseases, right? But it's not only about hormones. So there are multiple factors, okay? And if you talk about, autoimmune diseases, there are a lot of factors, like the genetic factors, right? So, जिस घर में, if the parents or the grandparents, they have rheumatoid arthritis, then the child is also, more susceptible to having rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so genes are playing an important role, right? Another important factor is environment. Okay, and another important factor is your immune system, how it is regulated, right? So they can be interrelated events. So because gene में कुछ defect है, तो immune regulation में defect होगा, right? या environment का कुछ effect है, so that can affect the genes, and if that is affecting the genes, that could affect the immune regulation, right? So these are the multiple factors that lead to autoimmune disease. Okay, so as I said, one of the component is genetic susceptibility, right? So if a person is carrying the susceptibility genes, okay, then there will be failure of self tolerance. Okay, अगर genes में कुछ defect है, so that will lead to improper regulation of the self tolerance mechanism. Okay, and if that fails, there will be self reactive lymphocytes, they will get activated, right? And as I said, another thing is infection. Okay, lot of time infections can also lead to autoimmune disorders, right? So these infectious organism, it could be a virus, it could be a bacteria. So when you have infection with these organisms, in some of the cases that can lead to autoimmune disorders, right? So again, you can see in this case, when there is some infection, okay, that will ultimately activate the antigen presenting cells, right? And that will lead to influx of self reactive lymphocytes. So अब जो एंटीबॉडी बन रही है वो हमारे ही organs के against बननी शुरू हो जाएंगी, and we will talk about the mechanism later. And then, as I said, all this can lead to tissue injury and autoimmune disease, right? So there can be genetic element, or there can be environmental factor like your uh, you know pathogens, right? Okay, so this, I think we'll talk about this later. Okay, जब हम antibodies के साथ mechanism discuss करेंगे. Okay. Okay, so okay, I'll just stop here. So if you have any question, you can ask. So we'll just take a small attendance break so that you can absorb अभी तक जितना बताया है. हालांकि बताया बहुत कम है, बट तुम्हें लग रहा होगा कि बहुत ज़्यादा बताया, बट अभी मैंने बेसिकली सिर्फ हॉर्मोन्स और ऑटोइम्यूनिटी और इम्यूनिटी के साथ उसका कोरिलेशन बताया. Okay, Adish.
Present, sir.
Atoiba. Ayushi.
Present, sir.
Sam. Devanshi.
Present, sir.
Ishita. Ishita. Janvi.
Present, sir.
Kshitij.
Present, sir.
Manaswini.
Present, sir.
Namrita.
Present, sir.
Nandini. Nehal.
Present, sir.
Rupal.
Present,
Sahiba.
Present, sir.
Sanjana.
Present, sir.
Shakti,
Present, sir.
Shivani,
Present, sir.
Tanvi,
Present, sir.
Vivek, Yukta, Yuvraj.
Present, sir.
Okay. Tridev, Tanvi, Vanshika. Okay, so Tridev and Vanshika are not present, right? Okay, students, so let's continue with autoimmunity. So we'll talk about the different mechanisms. Okay, students, so ये जो इतने सारे autoimmune disorders हैं, so they have different mechanisms. Okay, one of them is the release of sequestered antigens. Sequester basically जो छुपे हुए antigens हैं, right? जिसको immune system ने at the time of development नहीं देखा. Okay, so अगर वो वाले antigen release हो जाते हैं, then autoimmunity can happen, right? Another is molecular mimicry, right? Antibody बनी किसी और के लिए थी, right? But because of mimicry, it starts to attack the self cells. Okay, that is another mechanism. Another mechanism is inappropriate expression of class 2 MHC molecule. Okay, another could be polyclonal B cell activation. B cell activate होगा तो antibody production होगी और वो antibody अपने ही cells को जाके kill करना शुरू कर देगी. Okay, and there are few other mechanisms. Okay, but these are the major, mechanisms which have been known. Okay, so let's see them one by one. Okay, so what do you mean by this term sequestered? So as I said, hidden. Okay, so they are isolated and hidden away from the system. So these antigens are there in our body, but they're hidden. So our system, our immune system is not seeing them as such. Okay, just hold on, students. Okay, students. So, as I said, sequestered, it is hidden, isolated, right? So, any tissue antigen that are sequestered from the circulation and thus not seen by developing T cells in the thymus will not induce self tolerance. ठीक है? तो ऑब्वियसली जब वो एंटीजन एट द टाइम ऑफ डेवलपमेंट था ही नहीं, तो हमारी बॉडी ने उसको देखा ही नहीं, और जब देखा नहीं तो वो उसको नॉन सेल्फ रिकॉग्नाइज करेगी. ओके, सो एक्सपोजर ऑफ मेच्योर टी सेल्स टू सच normally sequestered antigen at a later time results in their activation, right? But the question is how these hidden antigen get into circulation. Okay, अभी मैं तुम्हें एक एग्जांपल समझाऊंगा, तुम्हें ये बात समझ आ जाएगी, राइट? एक एंटीजन है जो हिडन है, इम्यून सिस्टम देख नहीं पा रही, तो क्या होता है? ओके, नाउ देयर कैन बी अ ट्रॉमा to some tissue, right? There can be accident, there can be viral or bacterial infection, and that antigen can get into the circulation. For example, your sperms. Okay, so sperms develop in boys at a later time period, right? Not when they are in the fetus or when they are growing. So the immune system has not seen sperms when it was developing, right? So sperms, they are in a sac, so they don't get mixed with the blood, right? But now suppose there is some trauma, right? Or after vasectomy, right? Some sperm antigens, they can get into the bloodstream, right? So these sperms, they arise late in developmental phase and are sequestered from the circulation. After vasectomy or some accident, some sperms are released into the circulation and that can induce auto antibody formation. और एक बार अगर antibody sperms के against बन गई, so then that can create problem. Okay. Similarly, lens protein of the eye. Okay. So release of lens protein after eye damage, heart muscle antigens after myocardial infractions, right? Myelin basic protein, the MBP, antigen normally sequestered from the immune system, okay? In this case by blood-brain barrier, right? But because of the trauma, accident, or any factor, those hidden antigens can get into the circulation, and once they are in the circulation, the immune system sees it as non-self and start to mount an immune response against it. Okay. Another example is mechanism is inappropriate expression of class 2 MHC molecule. Okay. Now example is in the pancreatic beta cells. So I'm sure you know about the diabetes mellitus, right? So individuals with this diabetes mellitus, they express high level of both class 1 and class 2 MHC molecule, whereas the healthy people, they have lower level of class 1 and they do not express MHC class 2 molecules. But the pancreatic beta cells of diabetic patients, they express MHC1 and MHC2 molecule, which is not there in normal individuals, right? Similarly, thyroid acina cells, in Graves' disease, they also express higher level of MHC2 molecules on their membrane, right? So what happens with this? So this inappropriate expression of MHC class 2 molecule, which are normally expressed only on APCs, so you know that these MHC class 2 molecule are expressed on antigen presenting cells, okay? So they serve to sensitize T helper cells to peptides derived from the beta cells or the thyroid cell. तो MHC क्या करेगा? उसके अंदर जो पेप्टाइड होता है उसको ही तो लाके बाहर शो करेगा, right? So in this case, so these pancreatic beta cells or these thyroid acina cells, they should not express MHC class 2 molecule, but they are doing it, okay? And because they are doing it, so they will present the peptide which is of the self cell, and that will activate the T helper cells, right? So this could be a problem. Okay, so there are other evidence which suggests that certain agents, they can induce some cells that should not express MHC class 2 molecule, but because of those agents, they start expressing MHC class 2 molecule, right? So there are a lot of studies, we can skip those studies. Okay, but one of the agent is your interferon gamma. So if there is increase in interferon gamma in patients, that lead to inappropriate expression of MHC class 2 molecules. So हमने ये भी शायद पढ़ा था कि जब वायरल इन्फेक्शन होता है तो इंटरफेरॉन गामा बढ़ता है, इंटरफेरॉन गामा बढ़ता है तो वो MHC class 2 molecule का एक्सप्रेशन बढ़ाता है, right? So in some cases when there is some viral infection, this kind of situation can arise, right? Okay. Another is mechanism is polyclonal B cell activation, right? So there are a lot of bacteria, viruses, and they can induce non-specific polyclonal B cell activation, right? So if these B cells reactive to self antigens are activated, right, auto antibodies are formed. अब B cell activate होगा तो वो antibodies ही बनाएगा, right? But in this case, they will make antibodies against the self antigens. Okay. Example is in a disease infectious mononucleosis, which is caused by Epstein-Barr virus, variety of autoantibodies are produced, including autoantibodies reactive to T and B cells, rheumatoid factors, and anti-nuclear antibody. Okay. Similarly, in AIDS patients, they also show high level of non-specific antibody and autoantibodies to your red blood cells and the platelets. Okay. And what happens in these AIDS patients, because their immune system is suppressed, they're also prone to EBV infections, right? So EBV is उसको क्या कहते हैं, they are opportunistic pathogen. ठीक है, तो जैसे इम्यून सिस्टम सप्रेस होता है, EBV और ट्यूबरक्लोसिस और भी बहुत सारे डिजीजेस हैं जो पेशेंट को होने लगते हैं. ओके, and that will lead to B cell activation. So you can see in AIDS patient there will be antibodies, T cells, B cells, rheumatoid factors, then RBCs, platelets. So AIDS patients can have a lot of autoimmune related issues. Okay. Another most important mechanism is molecular mimicry. Okay. Now students, you can see here, this is your human cytomegalovirus. Okay. इसका किसी एक प्रोटीन का ये सीक्वेंस है. Okay. And there is HLA मॉलिक्यूल जो हमारे पास है होस्ट में. जब इसका सीक्वेंस देखोगे, ओके, सो दिस रीजन इज कॉमन, राइट? Similarly, if you see this poliovirus and acetylcholine receptor, there is a sequence similarity, right? And you can see this is for a lot of organisms. Okay. Now what happens? Let's take this example. Now किसी को measles virus का infection हुआ. Okay. So antibodies will be formed against the measles virus, right? So in epitopes के against antibody बनेगी, right? But the sequence is similar with myelin basic protein. So वो जो antibody है, it will go and bind to this myelin basic protein and it will start causing damage to the myelin sheath. Right? So कोई भी एग्जाम्पल ले लो, बिकॉज ऑफ सीक्वेंस सिमिलैरिटी वो एंटीबॉडी बनी थी उस बैक्टीरिया या वायरस के अगेंस्ट, बट तो एंटीबॉडी डज नॉट डिफरेंशिएट बिटवीन सेल्फ एंड नॉन सेल्फ। एंटीबॉडी सिर्फ अपना एपिटोप देखती है और जाके बाइंड कर जाती है। अब अगर वही एपिटोप ह्यूमन में होगा तो वो वहां जाके बाइंड कर जाएगी और वहां पे इम्यून सिस्टम एक्टिवेट कर देगी, राइट? सो दिस इज द मैकेनिज्म ऑफ molecular mimicry. Clear? Okay, students, I think I'll just stop now. Okay, any questions? Okay, students, so if there is no question, then I'll end the class and see you tomorrow morning. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay, students. Okay. Okay.